So far, we've set up the panel to show our list of projects that we've created, and we also set up the project page, so where we can enter some text and client information, a category, and upload images. And we did all this with our blueprints. The blueprint files, just to give you a little bit of recap, are the ones that configure those layouts. So for every page type that we want for our site, we can set up a different layout for the panel. And we do that with the blueprint files. The blueprint files can be found in your site folder in blueprints, and then you have a pages subfolder where you can find the different YAML files for every page type that we have. So we have one for the project and one for the project's page. And in those blueprint files, we use our so-called sections to create those layouts. Go back to Safari and show you a bit more about sections. So we have, in this case, we have a fields section here that creates the form, and we have a files section over here which creates that list of files or that gallery for us for the images. So those are the two section types that we used here, and we put them in columns side by side. And in our project's overview, we used a pages section to create that list of projects. So with sections, you can think of sections basically as features for every page type. What kind of feature do I need for the type of page that I'm currently creating? Does it need subpages? Does it need some content fields? Does it need some files? All this kind of stuff is something that you can decide for each individual page type. And then you can switch those features on or off depending if you need them or not. And in this video, I want to show you more about what we can do with the pages section and how we can optimize it even further. So you can see the grid already looks pretty good, and we did some tweaking to the pages section here already in the first video, but we can do even more with this. So let's go back to the blueprint, and you can see we've created it with just those few lines of code here, or this few lines of YAML syntax, which is pretty easy to read. So what we did is we used the sections option, and then we filled in the project section, and that is the name of the section, so we can choose that on our own. We use projects here for clarity, and then below that there are the options for the pages section. So you can see we choose the type pages here. And then we did the first set of tweaking. So we switched to the layout to cards. The default option here would be list. And if we remove that or we change that to list, you can see it looks like this. So that would be the default. And by switching to cards, it looks a lot more visual, a lot more interesting for such project overviews or product overviews or anything that has kind of nice preview images, big preview images that you want to show or immediately to better recognize which kind of projects they are. And then we also changed the image settings for each card. So by doing that, we can change the ratio of the image. So we did switched here to 4:5. The ratio is 100% adjustable to whatever you need. So for example, if your images are more like in a landscape format, you can switch to something like 3:2, or if those would be video projects, you could switch to video ratio and then have even more radical landscape pictures here. And we also switched on the cover option, and the cover option makes sure that the images are cropped and they fit into the frame of the card. So if we take this off, we switch this off or remove this, you can see we get bars right and left to each image because they don't really fit into that format. And so the aspect ratio of the image is kept, and it's just centered within the box that we've created here for each card. So those were the first steps to optimize the look and feel of the cards and the subpages. And as I said, this already works quite well. Let's switch back to what we had. And you can see here, when we create such a pages section, we also get a button to create a new page. And when we click on that button, you can see we get the dialog to create that page. So we can enter the title here. The title will be used to create the URL appendix, or the slug as it's often called. So the last path of the last part of the path, the URL path. And then you have the select box here for the template for the subpage that will be used. And so far it is still a select box, so I can select from all the pages, from the page types that we've created so far. And they are basically the ones that we created in the blueprint section. So if you go back here, you can see we have a default blueprint, we have a project blueprint, we have a projects blueprint, and they will turn up in that select box. That's kind of cool, but also not really what we want here, because now this already opens up space for errors when editors come along and create subpages, because now they could create a subpage that has the default template, or they could create another project's overview within a project's overview, which is not really what we want. So we want to make sure that only projects can be added here. And in order to do that, we are going to use the template option, and now we can use the name of the template that we want to make sure gets added here, which is our project template. So by doing that, whenever a new page gets created, it gets the project template, the project blueprint will be chosen for the panel view, and also the correct text file will be created. So let's have a look how this will end up. We need to reload, create add again, click add again, my first project. And you can see the select box is now disabled, so we can't choose between different templates. We only have the project template activated here. And when we create a draft, so every new page is always created as a draft, as a little side note. And if we click on that and it gets created, you can see we already land on our project page type that we've created before. So we could now upload the gallery, enter the information for the project. So it all looks good already. But let's check this out in the content folder. What happened there? So when we open the content folder and we open the projects folder, you can see Kirby created a new drafts folder. So we haven't been talking about drafts so far. Here are the ones that we created so far, which are the listed ones, those with the sorting number, and we have the one without the sorting number, so they are all public. They can be accessed with the URL, or they can be accessed in the project grid if you created one. So an exception from that is everything that is being thrown into the drafts folder is completely private. So when we open that up, you can see a new My First Project folder has been created there. So the URL appendix is also being used as the folder name. And within that, Kirby now created a project.txt for us, exactly what we wanted. So the template name is also used as the project, as the file name for the txt file in our content. And now whenever we update the project in our panel, the data will be stored in that project.txt and everything is as it should be. And this also makes sure, of course, as we have seen in previous videos, that the project.php template will be loaded and our project.yaml blueprint file will be used, as we already saw in Safari. So everything's cool, everything's set up. With the project being created in the drafts folder, as I said, it's not public yet. You can't access it as a regular logged out user. The only way to access it is if you have the private URL to it. So you can see Kirby automatically adds this really long secure token behind it. So this is a URL that you can then share with clients, for example, so if they want to check out the draft before it gets really published. But it never turns up on your site, so you don't have to be worried about the page turning up in your project grid already, or maybe in your sitemap or something like that. And that's really important, I think, because every new project starts empty as this one here, or mostly empty. And so you probably already first want to make sure that the gallery is there, that the information is correct, and then you can publish it later. So once the draft is done, you could then click here and move it to unlisted or to public and be ready and push it on your site. Okay, cool. So now we created our first draft, and you can see it turns up down here. it has the correct template, and that is a super important first step. So always when you create pages sections, make sure to check out the template option and see what kind of templates do you want to allow here. In some cases, it might be fine to leave it out completely and just allow all the templates. That depends on your setup, but most of the times you probably want to make sure that only a certain type of template is being added here. Okay, cool. So now we see the overview here with the status as well. So we see that the ones that listed with the green dot, there's the unlisted one with the blue dot, and there's the red one, which is the draft that we just created. What can we do next? You see so far we have the title displayed here in our cards, and most of the times this could be cool as well. But remembering from the last video where we created our fields here, we already started adding the client name to each project, and we also started adding the category to each project. So that could be really useful information to show in our overview as well. Maybe the client is important, maybe the category is important, maybe you have some other field that could be important in the overview. From my own client projects, I often remember that they had some internal ID system, especially if you work with product databases or something like that, or a shop system. Yeah, then you have like those reference IDs that are super important to the client. So you could add a field for them, and then it would be a question, how can we display that additional field in this overview? And we can do this with the info option. So let's add a new option here called info. And we can type pretty much anything in here. So let's start with hello world and see how that looks like. So you can see now it added hello world to every card, which is not really useful, but just for the sake of the demonstration, this is how the info line looks like. So it goes below the title. It's a little less dominant, and you can see it's just a nice little way of adding information to this. But of course, we need this information to be dynamic. It shouldn't be static like this. And in order to get this done, we can use Kirby's template syntax inside the blueprints. And it's very similar to what we've seen in the template so far, just a bit more simple and reduced. So it's not a full-blown template engine. It's mostly about accessing data from your pages in such fields like the info field here. And we can start by accessing the page object, very much like in the template. And then we can also use the same fields and the same methods that we did in the template. So now we can, for example, put the title in here. This is basically what the title already does. So we just duplicate that. Not very useful, but for the demonstration, you can now see it dynamically replaces the static hello world text with the title of each page. So this is nice. And with this, we can easily switch now to the fields that we've created in our project.yaml. So there we have a category field, for example, as you've seen in the fields list. And if we use that instead, it gets a lot more exciting. So now we have the category in here. So this is really useful. And now we can see the category here. Or we could easily switch to the client. And now we have the client here. So that's really nice. You could combine this with some static text. So this would be cool in this case. So for example, this could be the static part where you say, okay, this is the client name. Maybe it's important to display that as well. And then whatever comes in the curly braces, in the double curly braces, is the dynamic part that gets replaced. So if we do this, you can see client, and then info gets a bit longer. It depends if you really want to show it like this. I will remove it again and just keep it like that. So that is the info option. You can do the same thing for the title. If you want to say the text should be different, you can also make the text static. So now the text is static, and we can do the same things here. So we can now use the curly braces up here and say, okay, maybe the category should be the title, and the title should be down here, whatever. I mean, I'm just making stuff up here, but you can see this could also be a way to do it. So you could modify the text option here as well to change the first line. And of course, you can also combine stuff. So you could say page title by page client, and then we have the category down here. So this starts to make a lot more sense, right? So you have the full title, you see the client behind the title, and then you have the category below that. So yeah, that could be something that makes sense. No matter how you arrange those, you can get a lot of good stuff out of this, and it can be a really useful option to modify those two fields here. Nice. So the next one would be to have a look at the status again. So I told you before, we have the green status here, which indicates the sorted pages, the ones that have a sorting number in front. Then we have the one without a sorting number in front. And then we have the draft here, the one that is really truly private and only visible in the panel. And now we can do something about this list. Maybe we don't really want to show them all in the same list. Maybe we want to filter this list by the status that the pages have. So there's a status option. And the first thing that we could do is to say, okay, only show me the listed ones, the ones with the sorting number. So let's reload it again. And you can see the unsorted one vanished and also the draft vanished. So we only have the green ones in there. And of course, you can change this and only have the unlisted ones in here. Or you could also just have the drafts in here. So this is nice, but it doesn't really give us such a big benefit if we only have one list. This gets really useful if you combine lists. So if you don't have just one of those. Because with sections, we can have multiple sections of the same type and combine them in a single layout to get the most out of them. Let's do that. Oh, one thing I forgot here. There's a fourth status that would be published. That means it combines the listed and the unlisted ones. Let's check that out first before I move on. So now we have the listed ones and the unlisted ones. So we call them published in comparison to drafts. And now we can make use of that and say, okay, let's have a list with the published ones. And now comes another option called headline, where we can change the headline of the section. So normally when you choose a name for it, it will automatically turn this name into a headline, and then you can modify it further with the headline option. So now we have only published projects in here. Reload that. So this is cool. But now we have no way to see our drafts. So how do we do that? Let's rename this as well to published and copy the entire block and paste it before that. And let's rename that to drafts and also change the headline to drafts. And then also change the status to drafts. So we have one section that should only display the drafts and another section that should show the published ones. Cool. So now we have a list with the drafts and also a list with the published ones. And what's really cool about this separation is now you can instantly get a very nice overview of those. And when you change the status of an individual page, it automatically jumps around or jumps into the appropriate list. So once we click on public again, it will jump back into the published list. So this is really cool. This is already cool in order to have this stuff separated and make sure, okay, this is only the list of the drafts and this is one of the published. So we could have them below each other as I have it here, or we could have them side by side as we did with the fields and the gallery on the project page. But there's another advantage of this approach. We can now control the layout of the drafts even more closely. So as you can see here, the drafts often end up like this, right? So you start adding new projects, but they might not have images yet. So the the photography is still not done, or the client didn't give you the right photo yet, and you might not have all the content that you need. You might not have entered a category yet. So drafts often look kind of rubbish in such a grid, right, before they are fully done. So we can optimize this a bit further and switch back to lists here. That would be one of the first things I would do for drafts, because drafts often are totally fine in such a list. So this is, as I said before, you can make use of that separation between the lists and optimize the layout of each section here. You could also have a completely different info text depending on the status. So it could be something else for drafts than it could be for the rest. Maybe you have a review field in your drafts or in your project setup, and then someone could sign it off there, and you could show it here, something like this. So that's a really nice way to get organized, especially if this gets longer and you might want to put this into columns. Put this into columns. You could even have like 3 columns, add another section for the listed ones and the unlisted ones. So what we are often suggesting is that you use the unlisted projects or the unlisted pages to share the links with someone and say, okay, this is the unlisted project. Here for this one, for example, give that to the client. It's already public. Other people can check it out, but it's not in your list of projects so far on your website. And so they can review it. And once it's done, you can then finally give it a sorting number. You can move it to public, give it a proper sorting here, and then it's finally really, really published. So I have a nice date between draft and published project. So this is what you can do with multiple lists, multiple sections in this case, and the same could happen with fields, the same can happen with files, so you can always mix those sections in multiple ways. So let's have a look at 2 more options before we wrap up this video. What I also always recommend is to work extensively with help text within your interface. So every section can have a help option. And with this help option, you can then tell a bit more about what the editor should look after when they start creating drafts, for example. So always upload a nice cover first, or whatever. I mean, whatever kind of instructions are useful to your editors can be put here. So maybe you have some internal processes that need to be followed before a draft can be published, so you could write about it here. Anything else that could help your editors to work more efficiently, just write a bit of text in here and they know what to do. And this is the help option. And the last option that I want to show you for the pages section is the limit option. So for example, typical thing that you would see is such a project grid, like on our website here. Let's open the website up for real quickly. That could be limited to, let's say, just 6 featured projects or maybe 9 featured projects. And it might make sense to reflect that as well in your interface. So you have the limit option to say, okay, only give me the five most recent projects. And then from there on, it gets paginated and you can go through the pages and see the other project as well. But you get a more close reflection of what is on the website with the grid that is happening here. So that's the last one that I wanted to show you. There are a few more that you can check out on our website. So if you go to the docs and to the reference, you can find the documentation for the pages section and for all the other sections there as well. And I will also link them in the description below. And this is it about the pages section. We will see that probably in a lot more videos when we go into details about how to create a blog or similar kind of page types. But the system always works the same way. So it's really up to your imagination what you make out of it. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye bye.